Hey, welcome to the Healthcare Nation podcast. I'm your host, Rick Janata, and I'm really happy to continue the Big Challenges series with episode 4, focusing on medicine and the metaverse. We have a fantastic guest for this episode, physician, surgeon, ophthalmologist, and innovator, Dr. Ranya Habash. So a little bit about Dr. Habash. She is a Stanford University visionary innovative mentor. In that role, she really does mentor an elite group of folks and serves as an instructor, bringing new products to, from an idea stage to commercialization. She's also a clinical instructor and physician at Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, where she serves as the director of technology and innovation. Also, the president of digital health for Avellino Labs. That's a precision medicine and genetics company. She co-founded MetaMed, which really enhances experiences for surgical education and training. She's worked in her past with Microsoft and other advanced companies in the world of AI, machine learning, and the metaverse. So before we get started, quick disclaimer, the opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and are for informational purposes only. Also want to mention our website, healthcarenationpodcast.com. And of course, you can find the episodes on your Apple or Spotify podcast stations. And with that, Dr. Ranya Habash.
Rick, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Listen, I just want to start off with, you've had such a tremendous career, ophthalmologist, surgeon, obviously physician, everything you've done with your, advancements and contributions in the field of medicine and surgery, but also what you're doing in the digital health space. It really is incredible, whether it's, the private equity and your own companies, et cetera. Bring us up to speed. What are you up to lately? Let's just level set on that.
Sure. Well, it's sort of right in line with what we're talking about today, because I have my own startup metaverse company. It's called MetaMed. Myself and 2 other ophthalmologists started it because we saw a need for surgical education and training, and it has taken off like crazy. So there's a lot to talk about there and unpack.
Oh, that sounds
That's
great.
One of the things.
Yeah,
the other thing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and as you said, unpacking it. But let's just start with this. When you talk about, and I'll characterize it as this, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the Internet of Things. I would say this, the Internet of medical things, right? Whether it's wearables and what we're seeing in that space, which is pretty incredible. Also on the retail side and the consumer side, so many new entrants. What role can I call it the metaverse or digital health play as we look at the health sector and all of those applications kind of rolling up? Give us a broad kind of view of what we've got to look forward to.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, let's just stick with the metaverse then. The metaverse is sort of the medium for all of these different digital tools to fit in. So we can, talk about both, but in the realm of the metaverse is really interesting. So I think at least from MetaMed, the 3 prongs of MetaMed. Number 1 is surgical education and training, surgical navigation, like basically a surgical GPS, and then training, patient or training other physicians from all over the world. So I think that's probably the easiest use case for metaverse and digital health right now. The second prong of that is e-commerce, and you kind of talked about that. That is the ability to do digital storefronts and virtual storefronts in the metaverse. So there are some academic institutions that are doing this, and then, of course, other industry players as well. I think that's going to be important because now you can do direct-to-consumer sales of products and services through the metaverse. Then the third prong really is patient care. And under patient care, that's a very long list of things, but that's where all your Internet of Medical Things, your remote patient monitoring tools all come in. But another big component of that is precision medicine. And that's a really, I'm very passionate about that. I can talk about that forever, digital twinning and precision medicine. And actually that's being done with another company that I'm working with, I'm fortunate enough to work with, which is called Avellino. And we do precision medicine with genetics as the core for that, which again is, a very big part of the metaverse plan that I have in mind.
Fantastic.
So I'll stop there.
Yeah. So let me get back to the medical, the training and the education piece, and I want to go deeper on each of those areas. Obviously the training, the clinical care, and also the consumers piece. But on the medical training, it seems to me that the opportunity for standardization across the board and perhaps measuring from a qualitative and quantitative perspective, performance on education would be easier with this kind of digital metaverse kind of universe. Is that true, as well as scaling it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Right now, what we're really seeing, though, that's been very helpful is digital visualization in the metaverse. And it's because now cases that are recorded in 3D can be played back in 3D, or even with 4D or 5D, even mixed reality. And so that's the really exciting thing, because now when we have our conferences and we're sitting there and watching a case in 3D with a headset on, I mean, it's like you're right there, and there's really no better way to train or learn. I've learned a million things. Like every time I go, I learn new aspects of the cases that I couldn't appreciate just from a video or from reading about. So it's been really super valuable.
And I just want to make an assumption here. So this has got to be far beyond what I've seen in my career with say simulation and simulators, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I could blow your mind right now if I played some videos. I can share screen if you'd like me to even, but these are very complex, like retina surgeries, like ophthalmic surgeries, but in 3D. So you can see every piece of the tissue just beautifully. And the really nice thing about this is that the way we've done it, and I'm sure a lot of other people have done it too, we have the greats teaching the greats. So pretty much every week we have surgical grand rounds, and the greats in the whole wide world, get to come and showcase their cases, and then everybody discusses them. And what's really interesting actually is that it's almost more intimate than an in-person setting, and definitely more intimate than a Zoom call, because people are actually critiquing each other in a nice way. It's like, well, I would have done it this way instead, or I would have done it this way. And we're all sharing these pearls and best practices in a very intimate way. We do that quite a bit anyway, but I haven't seen it to this extent.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Let me pick up on the thread of the grand rounds and think of it in a clinical application. So like interdisciplinary rounds, is there a place for the metaverse, not only within an established, say, healthcare institution where you could have grand rounds or an interdisciplinary focus when you look at, say, a tumor board, et cetera, but can you also look at that across the country? I mean, is that where you really get to leverage the thought leadership, the content expertise, et cetera? Can you comment on that?
Yes, exactly. So when I say surgical grand rounds, what we're doing is actually inviting the best surgeons from different institutions around the world. And so now everybody from around the world is learning from, that highlighted speaker for the evening, from anywhere around the world. So this is not just at Bascom Palmer or just at Stanford. This is worldwide. So that's why it's been so amazing, because surgeons in Singapore have different techniques than the ones here in the States, and vice versa. So it's been just an amazing sharing of knowledge.
So much of what we're seeing with particularly innovative models of care is moving to care at home, the hospital at home, out of the traditional, four walls of a hospital. What are the applications of everything that we're talking about in the metaverse, AI, ML, even wearables, et cetera, in that space, in that home space context?
Yeah, well, this is another one that has a long list, but probably at the top of that list is patient education. A lot of the time, what we've seen is it's just simple communication that the patient needs in order to adhere to a care plan, to prevent a readmission back into the hospital, for instance, or to prevent, an emergent issue from occurring. So teletriage has been super important for us. And that means just having the ability to triage a patient visually, I guess, before they even come to the ER. And now imagine how much in healthcare savings, cost savings that's affording us, because now we're able to keep a large percentage of patients out of the ER just because we've triaged them ahead of time. And then the same goes for being discharged from the hospital too. We're able to keep them safer on the outside with all of these digital health tools, including the metaverse, so that they don't have to get readmitted. A lot of that is really just basic education, but the other part of that, of course, is the digital health tools, remote patient monitoring tools, IoT tools that will check everything from blood pressure to, oxygen saturation to mobility. There's a million different things. So I'm really excited about that. I think hospital at home or an expansion in telehealth using the metaverse is definitely a huge improvement for the health system overall.
Yeah, very, very exciting. I have to think about the applications in rural settings where you might have, not ready access to specialists and other providers. Tim, tell me a little bit about the applications in the rural setting. And also, I just think scaling the specialist, when you think about even the years of education it takes to have the kind of credentials and experience that you have, to be able to scale that and project it seems like a tremendous opportunity here. But can you comment on that, both the rural side and then say the shortage and specialists in particular?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we talked about this before, but this is where I got my start. I mean, this is what put me down this whole path into technology and digital health and medicine. So I'm from rural West Virginia. I saw that people they had to go through a lot of effort to get care, even basic care, even triage care, even emergent care, and so to me, this is very near and dear to my heart. This is really honestly why I do everything that I do. It's to provide greater access to patients who don't have good access. And even here in downtown Miami, we see it. You don't have to be in sub-Saharan Africa to make use of these types of tools. It's everywhere. It's rampant. It's even the mother who can't get child care, to get to the doctor in the first place, or busy professionals like us, right? I mean, I haven't had my own eye exam or seen a doctor for God knows how long. But that's where I think the reach for rural health is really important. And yes, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we've done here at Bascom Palmer is offer second opinion consults for rural areas. I mean, really for any areas, but this is worldwide. It's not just in the States. And what we've seen is patients, instead of having to sell their cars literally to get a plane ticket to come to Miami just to see one of our specialists, they're now being able to do it via telehealth. And that's whether it's the metaverse or just, straight telehealth with a Zoom call, it doesn't matter. The point is that they're getting access to these specialists that they never would have had otherwise.
Mm. Those are really such important points, particularly when you talk about the access piece and the out-of-pocket expense that folks would have to travel, et cetera. Projecting this has such a benefit for individuals in that scenario. Let's shift a little bit. I want to talk about mental health now, because I think that there's not, a journal that I've come across that isn't in some way looking at mental health applications when it comes to technology, apps, et cetera, obviously in the consumer space. First, is there a there? Does it have efficacy with respect to its application? And what does that look like? And what does it look like in the future?
Oh yeah, this has tremendous potential. So before we even get really into the mental health space, probably one thing that we should mention is like stroke rehabilitation. I guess it's sort of related. Yeah. So stroke rehabilitation, I mean, being able to instruct a patient to do rehab or training or physical therapy in the metaverse has been really powerful. So just starting with the stroke patients themselves, and of course that leads into mental health issues too, because if they're not mobile, if they're recovering from an injury, then there's a high rate of depression, of course, involved. And so being able to keep them occupied and trained and giving them these types of tools to get back on their feet faster has been very, very useful, I think, in telehealth, but really particularly for the metaverse, because they just feel so much more immersed in that experience. Now, in terms of mental health, absolutely, you're right. One of the biggest things that we've seen, and even I've prescribed this for patients, and I'm not even, a behavioral health expert, but for patients who have things like ALS, where they have really no ability to move anything other than their eye movement. Imagine now they're able to wear a headset and go skiing or go climbing Mount Everest or go to Machu Picchu just virtually. And that has been just tremendously valuable, I think, for their mental health. For any patients with depression, really doing any of those things has been a huge improvement. For geriatric care, when some of our patients lose their spouses, we're able to give them very nostalgic, I guess, experiences through the metaverse that have been able to keep them engaged. So absolutely for behavioral health, mental health issues, it's been just critical. I can't even overstate how much it's been necessary for us.
Yeah, that is so compelling. Those examples that you gave really, just tremendous. Let's talk about the wellness space for a second, because I know, a lot of folks may think, I work out, I have a Peloton member, et cetera. That's not what we're talking about here. This is immersive in a way that is far beyond that when we get to the dimensional aspects of it. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah, for sure. Unless you've tried it out, you can never appreciate it, right? You've been in a headset before, you understand how it is, but being able to meditate in a Tibetan temple and feeling like you're actually there, it's unlike anything else that you could do for a patient or for for a person for mental health or for even wellness. So I think in terms of wellness, yes, these types of excursions and experiences that they wouldn't have had are keeping them, of course, more well. But meditation is one place that we've seen a high usage, and like you said, it's just so immersive. It's amazing. I'll tell you as an aside, just a little story. So I took my headset home for Christmas to have my dad try it out. He's always we went to Petra previously. It was like 10 years ago, and he loved it. And I let him go again in the headset. I swear it was like a better experience than we had when we were there. It was more immersive somehow. It was just even more enjoyable than what we had when we were there, which was already tremendously enjoyable. But things like that, play into wellness, into behavioral health, into rehabilitation, everything.
Yeah. I think about the challenges associated with that, because there's clearly going to be, an access issue, and whether it comes down to being able, the affordability piece, the equity side of it, broadband availability, and just the technology. Tell us a little bit about that. Where are we going? Everything from price point to accessibility, and what are the obligations, I think, if you're going to look at the health sector kind of, across the board, and healthcare delivery, to make sure that vulnerable populations who would benefit from this are going to have access? I know that's a loaded question, but we've got to.
No, it's not. That's a really good question. And I love to answer this question actually, because we get this all the time anyway for telehealth, right? And my answer is always the same. It is, you can't weigh it in terms of who gets access and who doesn't get access. You have to weigh it in terms of no care versus some care. When you compare this, when you compare this to patients who would not ever have access to a tertiary level physician like the ones at Bascom Palmer, this is a huge improvement, right? And even getting some people access is better than getting nobody access. So that already, I think, is one big improvement that I would mention. So again, I just think it needs to be compared to no care versus some care. And then the rest of it for Metaverse particularly, you don't actually have to have a headset to do any of this stuff. A lot of in MetaMed, for instance, all of our meetings, you can also access from a desktop or from an iPad or from even your iPhone, as long as you have an internet connection. Sure, not everybody's going to have a broadband internet connection. But again, I go back to the same, answer, which is, some people won't, but the majority will. And, you have to be able to think of it as all of those patients who wouldn't have had access if you didn't have this technology.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Let's talk about the challenges, at least from my perspective and what I've seen that's out there. How about the confidence, the accuracy, and how that translates to, say, clinical outcomes? Any literature on that, data, research?
Well, I can tell you from my experiences, so in the past, if we had to follow up with a patient, let's say they were discharged from the hospital and they had congestive heart failure. They had a heart procedure and then, they're being monitored for about 30 days afterwards. So before the pandemic, honestly, a nurse would just call them and say, "How are you feeling?" And it would just be a phone call and it would be patient reported outcomes, et cetera. Now we're able to watch them. Even if we did telehealth only, like a Zoom call, you could actually watch them check for pitting edema. All they have to do is push on their ankle, for instance. And now you can actually see if there's any pitting edema. So it's already gone way more accurate than it used to be just with a phone call before. And now we go to the next level, which is using digital health tools to give us really accurate information about the heart function, things like the blood pressure or the oxygen saturation, et cetera. And now we have much more objective data to work with that's coming straight from the patient, from remote monitoring. And these are continuous streams of information. So you don't have to worry about a measurement that was taken at one point of time either. So I would say my answer to that is it's 1,000 times more accurate than it was before.
Oh, that's good to hear. Absolutely reassuring. Kind of along the same lines, maybe more on the risk side, where are we at with respect to privacy and security concerns? Obviously in the metaverse and with all the applications that are part of that, experience.
Yeah, so the metaverse is still sort of the Wild West when it comes to these regulations. And I, for one, would love to get ahead of that and make sure that it's not ruined for everyone with these with some of the regulations that don't allow you to do a lot of things. Now it needs to be private, it needs to be secure for our patients. Using technologies like Zoom for healthcare, which is HIPAA compliant. As long as you use these HIPAA compliant softwares, then you're reasonably protected. We're never going to be able to protect people 1,000% more than we need to, but we just do our best. And as long as, for instance, probably the best answer, is when the pandemic hit, for instance, all the software was allowed for transmission of medical records and for telehealth visits, except for real-time, broadcasting, like Facebook Live. So it's a little bit the same now, where as long as you're using HIPAA compliant software, then you're reasonably protecting your patient. I hope that answers it okay.
No, that's helpful. I think that clearly, not unlike what we've seen in any new emerging technology, there's an area of regulation that is going to clearly be probed and tested, and perhaps, unfortunately, some mistakes will be made, and then we'll have regulations that come forth. So more to come on that, clearly. You mentioned earlier the consumer side of things, and I'm really interested in this when you think about the metaverse reality, and as it applies to, all things medical and healthcare. Tell me about that, what you've done, what you've seen, and where that's going.
Yeah, sure. Several of the industry players or the pharmaceutical companies that we've worked with have wanted to sell their drugs, for instance, direct to consumer. That way patients get access to them directly rather than having to go to a doctor to have it prescribed first. And so it still needs to be prescribed, of course, but now it can be done virtually instead of, in a brick and mortar setting. So already that's improved, the access to drugs and services a lot more than it has before. Besides that, they've been able to do things like virtual showrooms. So imagine if, we've got an industry partner or a pharmaceutical company or a device manufacturer that wants to show off a new device. Before they would have to bring it to a national meeting, and only the people who went to that area would be able to see the new devices and play with them or check them out. But now with the metaverse meetings, what they're actually doing is product demonstrations just directly to the consumer, which in this case is, of course, the clinician or the health system. So they don't have to move these, gigantic, expensive pieces of equipment around and risk, hurting them. Instead, they're able to showcase them in the metaverse. And we've seen that a lot with some of the newer digital visualization technologies. So that's what I mean by e-commerce.
Yeah, fabulous. Listen, do you see most of this as being driven by the private sector, the tech side? I mean, I'm just interested in that. I'm a big proponent of private sector, public sector partnerships. It seems to me that this is where the innovation is happening, though, is in the private sector. Is that accurate? And can you expand on that a little bit?
I mean, there is a lot of public interest as well. I mean, you've seen that the market for metaverse technologies in healthcare is, I think it's projected at 3 to 5 trillion or something by 2030. I mean, that's just
incredible.
7 years away. Yeah, it's incredible. And there has been a big influx of venture funding, I guess, for different healthcare companies in the metaverse. So I think it's both. I really think it's both. And I think, we've had some setbacks, I think, in the crypto and blockchain world. But that's kind of, been a negative for the rest of the industry. Also, I think people are still trying to decide what they can even use it for other than gaming and social media. But as these use cases become more prevalent and showcased a lot heavier, then I think people are catching on really fast. Certainly in our circumstance, with MetaMed, for instance, when we show one of these meetings that we're having, or when we show something that we've done, then it really resonates and people are very quick to want to, help, either financially or otherwise.
Yeah, I think the halo effect that we've seen with some of the fallout in tech, to have that cover over and encompass the health sector probably isn't rational in my mind, particularly when you think about the clinical applications, the medical education applications. Clearly, the ability to advance healthcare, it's something that stands on its own, enabled and facilitated by this technology, which quite honestly is mind-blowing when you get into what difference it could make in the care of an individual.
Yep.
So let me ask you this, with respect to who's got it right, who's doing this? Are there any institutions, academic institutions, hospitals, health systems, or even companies that are out there besides obviously your own, which I think is clearly leading the pack on the private side, that you say, wow, check this out. They're really, moving the needle on the applications of Metaverse and the impact factor?
Well, I wish there were more. I think there are some that are starting to dabble. They want to say that they're entering the metaverse. Stanford was the first academic institution to have a storefront in the metaverse. So they're way ahead of the pack already. But I'll tell you, we have about 15 different academic institutions that have partnered with us for MetaMed. And so even though we're the ones pumping out the use cases, they've all adopted them and are using them at their institutions as well. We're starting to see now more medical students and residents who are getting grants from their institutions to get VR headsets so they can come attend our functions as well. They don't have to have a VR headset, of course, but we're finding most people, once they've had like 1 or 2 events on the desktop, for instance, they'll go and invest in a headset. So I do think that it's being taken up. But a lot of these flagship institutions like Stanford are the ones really leading the pack there. Certainly Microsoft and Meta, you've heard that they are trying to forge a partnership to do more business use cases in the metaverse. But in terms of healthcare specifically, I think that, it's more the academic institutions that are driving this. Fantastic.
So let's close it up with, what's next? Your last thoughts with respect to, the metaverse, all things there across the board. What do we have to look forward to? I'd like to always leave on an optimistic note, and this is clearly a space where, as I said, the advances are going to be incredible. So tell us what you think, Dr. Habash.
There's so much optimism here. I'm sure you can see it. It's any new technology has these issues, right? And, in 1990s, we were debating what is the internet? Like, how powerful can it actually be? And that's the thing that I always actually start all my presentations on the metaverse with clips from Brian Gumbel and Katie Couric talking about what is the internet, because we're there right now. We're still trying to figure out what exactly is the metaverse, what can we do with it, and there's going to be a few people who just need to plant their flag and go figure it out, kind of like we did at MetaMed and some other places. But I think leaving everyone on an optimistic note, we go through this every time there's new technology. I'm sure Henry Ford went through this before he released the car. Of course, we're going to need to refine regulations and payers and uptake and use cases. That's all par for the course, and if you want to get out of your comfort zone and lead the future, that's just something that has to be done, So I think I would leave it on that note, which is, if we want to think of the metaverse and we're not sure what we can do with it, just remember the days when we were trying to decide what in the world we could possibly do with the internet and where we are now with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that every time I look at my phone, right? And where we were 30 years ago with that. Dr. Habash, this has been fantastic. We're going to look forward to hearing a lot more from you, not only with respect to what you're doing in the field of medicine and ophthalmology, but in this field of the metaverse, AI, ML, all things digital. I'm sure we could talk for hours, and we're going to have you back to have a follow-up conversation. So thank you for your time, your insights, and perspectives here on the Healthcare Nation podcast.
My pleasure. It was great. You're right. We can talk forever about this. I know you're just as knowledgeable. So.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thanks again.